takes more than being online to be a great online university. It takes time and experience. University of New England pioneered distance education in the 1950s and has been perfecting it ever since. With features like 24/7 tutor access, we're now rated #1 for teaching quality and support, and the only public university in Australia to receive a 5-star rating 14 years running. So, for an expert online education, choose UNE.
So Grace, thank you for joining us today for Law 499. And can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Hi, my name is Grace Borsellino and I'm a lecturer in law at Western Sydney University in the School of Law, and I predominantly teach in corporate law and law and technology, and I also research in this area.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. We're looking forward to your insights. First question. So what do you see as some of the critical or crucial legal issues with developments or innovations in new technology?
Sure. Well, new technologies could be really anything, and so I just thought I would choose a few sort of pinpoint examples. One of the things that I like to look at is startups, technology startups, because really they face some really big challenges when they are trying to enter the market and develop new technologies. And one of the things that they face is the burden of compliance, the burden of the race to not only get their product or their technology up and running, but also have enough money, because a lot of them don't have access to venture capital or a lot of finance initially. So they have so much against them already that one of the sort of biggest challenges for them is to comply with all of the regulation as well. And that can be really difficult when you're trying to still trial something with the market. So one of the things that's been helpful with, I would say, technology startups has been regulatory sandboxes that a lot of the regulators, both in Australia and also internationally, allow technology startups and incumbent financial, say for instance financial institutions, if it's a fintech, they allow them to test their technology in the sandboxes that the regulators offer, and then using that sandbox can sort of test it in a real market without all of the extra burden that they might otherwise face, for example, if it was a financial technology startup firm. So one of the biggest things I think is like staying alive and surviving that initial startup. Secondly is maneuvering through all of the compliance burdens that they face. And just any kind of uniform regulatory management of this startup, because it all depends on what jurisdiction. It might be built in India and then want to enter the market in Australia. And so there's all of these questions about how do you design within this varied regulatory environment across jurisdictions.
Yeah, no, there's some excellent points. So let's drill down into a little bit more detail. So specifically, what do you see as some of the common legal issues within particular areas of technology? Now, I have provided a list based on this particular course, so blockchain, big data and artificial intelligence, and chatbots and social media, but I'm happy to hear your views on other technologies. Can you give some specific examples of legal issues that you researched and in your teaching you've come across?
Yeah, I think with blockchain, it had a really, when it became recognised to the market, a lot of people associated blockchain with Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. And so I feel like blockchain's entry to the market has been associated with crypto assets and the complexities that are associated with that, as opposed to really understanding the blockchain and what it can actually do and how it can help with other things like supply chain transparency and it can be really useful with, compliance for businesses. And so I think one of the challenges that we face with blockchain is, number one, understanding moving forward what it can do without the stigma that's attached to all of the problems that have occurred with cryptocurrency, Ponzi schemes, dirty wallets. But on a positive note, the immutability of blockchain has also allowed for some fantastic police investigations to trace some online criminal activity in relation to child pornographic material and so forth. So I guess on the one hand, at the moment, again, it's a uniform regulation of blockchain and what happens on the blockchain, and getting the market to really understand the difference between a public blockchain, a private blockchain, and how it can really be used with each industry, and understanding how to regulate, how to comply with regulation around that. So I think, I don't know if that really answers your question about blockchain, Michael. What do you think?
Yeah, thank you. That's excellent. And what about your thoughts around big data and artificial intelligence?
Yeah, big data and AI, I think it depends who's asking. If you ask the consumer, I think some issues for consumers are the privacy of their information, how it's used, and that power imbalance. Perhaps it's used in a manner that really disadvantages the consumer, or that doesn't really properly inform the consumer about what's happening with its information. However, if you look at it from the perspective of the large organisations that will adopt this technology, then your question is, how are you complying with managing the data that you collect through these technologies? And also, when you implement it, how do you ensure that your organisation is complying with this, and who's responsible? Like, is it going to be the developer that developed that technology that's now faulty and causing your organisation to breach laws, or is it going to be your organisation and a particular section of your organisation that's responsible for ensuring that they make the proper decisions about technology governance and the use of AI and chatbots and big data and things like that? So this is definitely something in the US that is being explored in terms of fiduciary duties of developers, and looking at their responsibility in that conversation, especially with distributed ledger technologies. Definitely, if things go wrong, the question is now, who has that fiduciary duty? And if you just look at little things like Centrelink, their calculations, they use the calculations for welfare payments that were incorrect. And, when you look at things like that, yes, they're wanting to incorporate technologies that enhance their service, but what happens when things go wrong? How do we move forward from there? And just with social media, I think, I'm quite interested in content regulation, where we tend to be now holding the big corporates responsible for what's going on in their environment. And I think Mark Zuckerberg released a white paper about a month or so ago, asking that we have a more unified approach to online content regulation, because it seems that Google, Facebook, ISP providers are being asked to take down offensive conduct and things like that, but there's actually no content regulation independent body, and maybe that would really assist is both the national agenda, but internationally, to regulate all of that as well. So and any others, I was looking at maybe, looking at automated cars, and, that trolley question about, well, ethics behind automating and putting public health at risk. So just those questions are quite interesting. And human rights and technology, especially with reference to big data and AI, are those online environments equally designed and managed to allow for people with disabilities to also enter those online environments?
Thank you, Grace. And I love your reference to the trolley dilemma. Those people watching, if you've watched The Good Place on Netflix, the very first season was a great example where dilemmas and not just a theoretical paradigm, they also use modern visuals to make it really very effective and quite fun in places. So that's great. Right, the last question, Grace, is so over the next 5 to 10 years, what do you think will be the biggest legal issues in technology?
I think cybersecurity, as we as a society shift to doing more online in terms of, you know, accessing laws, accessing the our markets, investing, opting into services that are now predominantly online, whether it be robo-advisors, banking, whatever. I think cybersecurity is that one thing. Why should we trust the organisation that's managing our personal information? We're having to divulge all of our passwords and personal information each and every time we interact with these parties. And so the question is, how is each and every one of these technology companies or these organizations that use technology, how are they ensuring that that the individual and organizations cybersecurity is being protected? And when you look at like examples that I gave earlier about little startup fintechs, you know, a lot of the times they just don't have the financial means to do that 150%. And even when they're allowed to test their technology in a sandbox that's, you know, indirectly endorsed by the regulator by being part of that program, they still can't really ensure 150%, you know, market protection. But whilst they're in that sandbox, they can then address those issues. But, you know, there's still risk. There's always going to be risk. And there's going to be, if you look at just, you know, since this pandemic began and Zoom is getting hacked, you know, who would have thought? So I think it all has to do with how many people are now using these technologies and what's happening in this space. But I think cybersecurity is definitely such an important issue moving forward.
Yeah, thank you, Grace. And in fact, I'd like to endorse that. Yeah, the University of New England has rolled out a cybersecurity training program for all 3,000 staff, which was mandatory. And in fact, over this period, we've had over 5 serious attacks in we know we're under attack, and so we're just one organisation, of course, and many others. So, Grace, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate your insights.
You're welcome. Thank you.